when there is a dog bite, is this a case that you primarily just take to the insurance, or is this something that is worthwhile consulting an attorney?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it's generally, I always say consult with an attorney because you know what? If you consult with an attorney, you can always decide not to hire them and to handle it on your own. But getting more information, and again, the laws in different states are different. And we were talking about like Arizona has a strict liability, but some states don't. Some states, it's more of a negligence standard. And so then it's, did you know or should you have known that your dog was vicious, was a vicious animal. And so, and that, it's kind of interesting because, we call that the one free bite rule.
Yeah.
And so that means that, until the dog bites the first time, you don't know your dog's a biter and you don't know your dog's dangerous.
Interesting.
So in some states, dogs get that one free bite. Yeah. And then,
They get and the worst part is they get the taste for blood at that point. So then they're just absolutely loose, wild. Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome, everyone. Another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drugs, and Products. Got that right?
Welcome to Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases.
And product cases. Boom.
That's what we do. Dangerous drug and product cases.
You'd think I'd have an idea of what we're doing at this point, but honestly, I just show up and start talking. That's about it.
We'll have some surprises for you in here today, so that's good.
I'm looking forward to it.
I always like to keep you on your toes.
I know. It might be surprising. I have no idea what we're talking about every time I come onto the show. You give me some quick bullet points. I read through it. I don't even read fully through it. I just kind of see the first few and then kind of hop into it and go with it as we figure it out. Real quick, though, we are recording this early because you will be going on a trip to Australia.
I am. Actually, when we release this, I will be in Australia, and not just Australia, but Tasmania.
Holy.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah, I hear there's a lot of devils out there.
The Tasmanian devils?
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited. I hope I see one of those. But definitely some kangaroos. I've heard they have like spiders the size of dinner plates and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever go to Australia. It sounds like a beautiful, awesome place. I'm sure it's great, but my God, when you see the dangers of nature and natural life there, it is terrifying.
Really? Well, maybe I haven't researched this enough. I think I'm not going to look.
Yeah, well, it's mostly, I think, like the bug species. I mean, the bug, like you said, the spiders and the snakes, and I mean, I guess snakes not bugs, but the spiders and other, little critters like that, absolutely massive. I mean, it's like, they came out of Chernobyl and they're triple the size they should be.
Okay, I really didn't know this. I'm pretty excited about it. Shout out to Rachel and Linda. I'm very excited to come and see you guys in person. So hopefully I'm not going to be at significant risk of death or dismemberment by any of this wildlife. But I do have to say now that one of the areas that we're going to be staying in, and this is Rachel's home, it's called Penguin.
Penguin.
Yes, so it's a town called Penguin on the beach, and they're known for their cute little Australian blue penguins.
That was my guess.
You didn't know they were blue.
I didn't know they were
blue.
Little. Yeah, true. Well, most penguins are pretty little. I don't think I've seen a monster-sized one. But if there's any place there would be an oversized penguin, it's probably Australia.
Probably in Penguin, Australia.
Yeah.
Well, I suspect that once I start posting and sending you pictures, you're going to want to go to Australia. And I'll be happy to go back. Although I'm going to try to convince Rachel and Linda to come visit Arizona after this trek. So we'll see about that.
Well, maybe. If it's a cruise where I can find sanctuary in the night and I don't have to worry about about spiders crawling up on me while I sleep. But we should go ahead and hop into the episode here.
All right. Okay. Work before play.
Yeah.
Got it.
Starting as we always do, interesting cases. We've had some good ones so far, and this is honestly my favorite part because I feel like there's so many interesting small little cases that go on that don't lead to necessarily massive cases or things that we personally handle, but something that is, commonly affects probably more people than you'd expect.
Yeah. Well, and actually, one of the things I'm on all of these listservs and I, scour the news for these types of cases. And a lot of these things, again, they might not be dangerous drug or product cases, but they generally will involve a lawsuit one way or the other, and often, and pretty much almost always, it involves a personal injury. So again, that is a case that we or other attorneys could handle But the first one that we're going to jump into actually is near and dear to our hearts and all dog lovers' hearts, although it's not necessarily on the positive side of dog ownership. And that is that they just recently released an update on dog-related injuries. This is it came out through the insurance industry. And so they were talking about how claims for dog bites have increased significantly. So we have the stats now from 2022, and insurers paid out more than $1 billion in dog-related injuries in 2022.
Jesus.
That's a lot of money for misbehaving canines.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like a 28% increase over the past year, over 2021. The interesting thing about this, though, is that the number of claims decreased slightly, but the amount of money that they paid out went up significantly. And they don't address exactly why that is. So I'm not sure if the injuries were more serious or if it's kind of like cost of living increase, cost of medical expense increase, that the treatment was significantly higher.
Yeah, my first guess was kind of going to the severity of it, but
why are dogs more vicious now? I mean, what is this like global warming or something? Is like, I mean, what's going on? Why are dogs biting harder or causing more damage?
Yeah, well, and then you mentioned that kind of like overall prices, inflation is going up, so maybe that has a piece in it as well. And I'm assuming the emotional distress has to play a role into dog attacks as well. I mean, that is terrifying.
Have you been attacked by a dog?
No, but I mean, I've watched a lot of,
curious.
Like cop or like drug TV shows where they just sick the German Shepherds out and they're just, I mean, they're full on hunters. They're hunting down these criminals.
They're taking you down, and absolutely.
I could not imagine. I mean, the way they leap and just grab on and never let go. Yeah, that I would be scarred for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and those guys are specifically trained to take down the perpetrator, to stop you, that sort of thing. But these claims, of course, are going to be related to household pets. And generally, I've had people ask me, well, how, I was bitten by a dog, but, the dog owner doesn't have a lot of money. I mean, how do I get paid for this? How do I get my medical bills taken care of, that sort of thing? And it's generally a homeowner's policy. So if the person owns their home, they, of course, have to have an insurance, and that would generally be included under that policy. There's also, of course, renters policies. So, again, if somebody's renting, they might have a renters policy, and that would cover the injuries. But, you're not required to have renters insurance. And so a lot of people don't have that coverage.
Yeah, and I remember when we got Bruno, or when I got Bruno, we got him a dog's license. And does that play a role into anything? Because I know if there's any issues with your dog and they're not licensed, then there could be some big problems there as well.
Well, I think that's more of an administrative, and you would get a fine. But yeah, and a lot of people, I guess, don't keep their dogs licensed.
I didn't know it was a thing, honestly, until you told me about it.
Until I licensed your dog.
Yeah, I have no clue.
And then I said, hey, Ben, I need the updated rabies shot because we're renewing the license on Bruno.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really a separate issue. But the types, and over the years, I've handled a number of dog bite cases. And like you said, I mean, they can be really traumatic. And generally speaking, a lot of times it's children.
Yeah.
I mean, as you would imagine, and children kind of...
Easy prey.
Closer to the size, easier to take down.
Yeah, it's just an easy, quick meal.
Snack. Yeah, no. The thing, I guess, about children is that and I noticed this actually in October. We had family visiting and a couple of young children, and kids just they move faster. They're more erratic, and I think it kind of makes a dog a little bit more nervous. But really, the injuries tend to be, a child comes into somebody's home and doggy, and they want to go pet the doggy, and then they can kind of pull on the ears, pull on the tail. So one of the generally speaking, well, and actually, I should get into this. Like, different states, of course, have different laws with regard to with dog bites and the responsibility of owners for injuries caused by dog bites. And there are some states where it's called a strict liability, and that would be Arizona. So in Arizona, if your dog bites somebody, you are strictly liable. You're automatically liable, no questions asked.
Yeah.
There is, of course, one defense, and that is provocation. So if you provoke the dog
Yeah.
then that could decrease your injuries, or you might not even be able to, depending on what you did, of course, you might not even be able to collect for it. So if you come in and you just start messing with somebody's dog and harassing
Yeah.
it, and it bites you, well, it probably should have bit you.
Well, I would imagine it would be, it would probably play into self-defense as well. That's like a lot of
The dog is defending itself.
well, not defending
I mean, it
itself,
is.
defending its owner, like that's what I would assume a lot of dog bites come from, is where the dog thinks the owner's threatened, and then, that's when they get really vicious as well.
Right, right.
But when there is a dog bite, is this a case that you primarily just take to the insurance, or is this something that is worthwhile consulting an attorney?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think it's generally, I mean, I always say consult with an attorney, because you know what? If you consult with an attorney, you can always decide not to hire them and to handle it on your own. But getting more information, and again, the laws in different states are different. And we were talking about, like, Arizona has a strict liability, but some states don't. Some states, it's more of a negligent standard. And so then it's, did you know, or should you have known that your dog was vicious. It was a vicious animal. And so, it's kind of interesting because, we call that the one free bite rule.
Yeah.
And so that means that, until the dog bites the first time, you don't know your dog's a biter and you don't know your dog's dangerous.
Interesting.
So in some states, dogs get that one free bite.
Yeah.
And then,
They get and the worst part is they get the taste for blood at that point. So then they're just absolutely loose, wild.
Well, all right, let's not get crazy. Maybe not.
No.
But,
Well, I mean, I think it's really interesting because, I used to take Bruno to the dog park a lot, and I used to think it was such a great opportunity to socialize him with other dogs. But I quickly realized after, a few times there that not everyone's dogs is as well behaved as Bruno.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a lot of dogs that, even if they are well behaved, once they're out there, they're playing, they're going back and forth. I mean, things can kind of get out of hand pretty quickly, and it's hard to predict that.
Right. Well, and sometimes, again, a dog is just playing, and as part of the play, dogs bite each other. I mean, generally not viciously, but they bite each other during play. And if you're playing with the dog may bite you, again, thinking it's play, but, that you could break the skin, it could injure you.
Yeah.
So it could be pretty serious. And one of the things you had asked about whether you should get in touch with an attorney. I think we're thinking of kind of minor injuries, but some of the cases that I've seen have been pretty significant. And again, children tend to be the ones that are bitten most often, and you see a lot of children getting bitten in the face.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're down there, they have their face right up in the dog's face,
Yeah.
and they think that it's all fun and games, and they've seen cartoons of Bluey or whoever, and, and they're messing with the dog, and the dog snaps and bites them. And some serious facial injuries requiring cosmetic surgery. There was actually a case recently in the news, and I had forgotten about this when I was thinking about talking about this, but it was actually a model, and I don't remember if it was her boyfriend or her friend's home, but the dog jumped at her and bit her entire top lip off. And of course, they went to the emergency room immediately and took it with them, but they were unable to reattach it. And so she was completely disfigured. And this was a woman who was a model who was making her living, through her appearance. I believe she was also maybe a skateboard star. I'm trying to remember the details on this. I think it was a lot of social media. And actually, if you check, I know it was on TikTok and some of the sites, but she went through this process of showing the photographs as she went along through her recovery. Wow. And of course, she had to heal up, and then she had cosmetic surgery to try to kind of rebuild her face. But so it can be just, horrendous injuries.
And I know that there's such thing as lost wages, but usually, I'm familiar with that in car crashes where, you don't have access to your car and then you have to lose, or you're injured and you lose work time. But for something like that where it's affecting your livelihood, it's not necessarily she has to take a few weeks off. It's, she's probably not going to be a model anymore.
Right. And that's just something, again, all of these cases are very individual, and you look at that specific person's injuries. And so somebody whose appearance really makes a big difference is going to have significantly more injuries in that, in that area. But even aside from the loss of earnings, that situation is, multiple surgery after surgery, and you're going to have downtime and recuperation time, whatever your job is. And then just the emotional distress. Facial injuries are horrible in any type of accident or injury, and then you like these children. I mean, they're young children, and I mean, you know how, I mean, I guess it's difficult everywhere, but I mean, you go to school and you have this facial scarring, and even with treatment, I mean, we've had cases. I mean, they'll have permanent scarring even if they don't have like total, losing a lip or something along those lines. But yeah, so different states have different rules, and again, oftentimes you wouldn't know if somebody has insurance coverage or not. And there's always weird issues too, like a dog is at somebody else's house.
Yeah.
And so generally it's going to be, at least in Arizona, it's going to go back to that dog owner. But then, I've had cases where we've tried to figure out, okay, well, was there negligence on the person who, maybe it was dog sitting or the dog was visiting there, and was it somehow, did they contribute to the situation that caused the injury? So those kinds of situations, it's always best to talk to somebody. And
yeah, and I think this is definitely an unrelated question, but it came up this week because I was, doing my random, just going through YouTube, going down the rabbit holes, and I saw a clip that I've seen in the past, and it was of a chimpanzee attack victim.
oh gosh,
That was on Oprah Winfrey.
horrible story.
Yeah, and so, I mean, again, kind of unrelated, but is there any type of similarity there? Because they're both pets, even though one is an exotic pet. But, if it's a let go or if it gets out of the cage and just causes serious damage like that.
No, absolutely. And again, that would go to the homeowners. And so a household pet is generally going to be covered, but it's a good issue that you bring up, because there are some insurance companies now that will not write a policy or that will exclude injuries if you have a certain type of dog
Yeah,
that's
like the pit
considered a
bulls
dangerous dog. Yeah, and pit bulls are always the ones that get all of the flack, and the sad thing is that pit bulls, I read somewhere that the reason they're not police dogs is because it's really hard to train them to attack people.
Really?
Yeah.
That's terrible.
But I mean,
It's such a terrible that they have such a bad rap then.
well, it's terrible that, it's this unearned, but the thing is that they are very strong dogs. And I mean, if you think like the whole term pit bull, I mean, and back to the Michael Vick case and everything, I mean, these dogs, horrible people would train them to fight to the death for people to bet on. So they would be trained from puppyhood to be vicious.
Yeah.
But again, even in those scenarios, the training was to kill the other dog as opposed to attack humans. Although once you start, God knows what they do to them. But I mean, the training and probably, I don't know if they're giving them steroids or other things along those lines. Whatever they're doing to make them actually more vicious. So they've gotten certainly a bad rap. But actually, on the list of the dangerous dogs that are generally an issue, there's it's not just the pit bulls, the Akitas, Alaskan Malamutes, any wolf breeds, which kind of makes sense. I mean, kind of goes to your wild animal thing. Chow Chows, Doberman Pinschers, German Shepherds. I mean, and again, those are kind of the classic police dogs where they train. Let's see, well, pit bulls are on there. Great Danes, Rottweilers, Huskies, and Staffordshire Terriers, which are kind of similar to the pit bulls. I was quite happy to see that there were no cattle dogs or Pekingese Chihuahua mixes on the list.
He's a German Shepherd, Chihuahua mix. He's only half as vicious.
We're going to have to show a picture of Bruno on here because, I remember when you got Bruno, you came and he was a little puppy. And I think you got him off of Craigslist or something.
Yeah, well, okay, hold on. Let me preface this. Okay, I am a strong believer in shelter dogs for sure, but, I was young in college and I really had this vision of, getting a puppy, which is definitely very hard in shelters. And so this Bruno had been adopted from the shelter and that the owners didn't want him anymore, I guess. And so I adopted him or got him from Craigslist, but they got him from a shelter. So I'd like to say transitive property, I adopted him from a shelter, but they did tell me when I picked him up, German Shepherd Chihuahua, which at the time, I mean, I kind of believed it. I mean, he was a very small dog for sure. He was like, he was pretty young, 2-3 months. Less than 10 pounds, around 10 pounds, but his paws were massive.
Yeah, they still are.
They still are. The massive paws. I mean, bigger than your dogs, and they're on par. and had the same colors of a German Shepherd, and had tiny. It was small, but also had the apple head that a lot of Chihuahuas will have. So I was fully convinced until did a little bit more research, and it makes more sense for him to be a Pekingese Chihuahua.
Yeah. Well, and he just did not get the size either. I mean, what is he, like 20, 25 pounds and short little legs. I mean, he's adorable. He's the cutest dog ever.
I still like telling people that he's a German Shepherd Chihuahua because you always just get, what? No. Who was the mom? Who was the dad? I can't even imagine. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know every time. And I just say, leave it up to your imagination. I don't know,
Well, you get a lot of attention from that dog. You always have. I think it's one of his selling points.
Yeah. No, he's a good dog.
Yeah. So, and our dogs are crazy nutcases, although they're not biters, but they are jumpers and barkers and all of that, and they seem very intimidating, which I guess is good. Intimidating, all the bark without the bite.
They don't need a bite if they're that intimidating.
Yeah, if they just keep people away, which they probably do.
Well, at least with the lockdown, people had more time to train their dogs, so maybe that might.
In theory, although my dogs would not be a prime example of that. Well, actually, there's training that happened. The actual success of the training, I guess, is more of an issue.
The reception and maintaining of that might be a different story.
For sure. So another case that's in the news right now that I thought was particularly interesting is a recall of sledgehammers.
Interesting.
Right? And basically, what is a sledgehammer? It's like two pieces, right?
Yeah, I just can't imagine that being a very complicated process or item.
Well, it's got like the handle and the big hard
Sledge.
the sledge and the hammer. Yeah. So the crazy thing about these, though, is that they're detaching. So people are sledgehammering things.
Yeah.
I've never used one. I've used a hammer many, many times, but not a sledgehammer. It sounds like they're just, they're bigger, they're bulkier. We'll put up a picture of these things. But what's happening is that the head is coming off.
Wow.
And as you can imagine, you're working away at this and the head goes flying. Well, where does it fly?
Probably back at you.
Back into your head sometimes, yeah. So there have been some pretty serious injuries, hence the recall. The product are the DeWalt, Stanley, and Craftsman sledgehammers. And there's about 2.2 million of these things out there. The actual recall says that the head of the sledgehammer can loosen prematurely and detach unexpectedly during use, posing an impact injury hazard to the user.
Impact injury. Well, and I have used a sledgehammer before.
You have?
I have. I was pretty young. It was when we were doing some remodeling at my dad's house, and
okay.
Yeah, I got to use it a little bit. Very heavy items, very difficult to use. You got to be a big guy to be throwing that type of weight around, but. You were throwing it down with a lot of force, and even though it is heavy, I'm assuming, depending on the material too, if that thing just goes flying off with the amount of force that it's coming at it, like it can get some good air.
Yeah. I think I might have used a sledgehammer because, as you said that, I did help with some remodeling. But I should say that I didn't help with the remodeling. I helped with the
destruction.
It sounded like it was kind of fun to tear down some walls, so I assume I probably did use a sledgehammer for that. And I don't know how common it is to use these things, but there's obviously a lot of them out there, 2.2 million of these specific ones that are recalled. These are things that are available, Home Depot, Ace, Amazon, all over the country. And like I said, there have been, it looks like 192 reports of this happening with injuries. So if you have one of these things, again, you can get a refund, go back to the store, contact the manufacturer, a couple of options on that. But take a look at what you're using because that's pretty scary.
And is there a specific brand? Because I know with the other recalls, like for example, the strawberries, it was a farm and there was a variety of different brands that those strawberries could be in. Is that something similar here with where the people producing these sledgehammers for several different brands?
Yeah, so there are three different actual brands that are involved. It's DeWalt, Stanley, and Craftsman. And again, I'm not like a big tool person, but I've heard of all of those names. So it sounds like, some of the bigger ones. And then there are a bunch of different models within those brands. And certainly too many for us to just list here. We may be able to put up a graphic on that. But again, if you have, one of those brands, take a look. You can go to the Consumer Product Safety Commission website. They have a listing. Make sure that the one that you're using is not one of these recalled, because it sounds like they're pretty horrendous injuries.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, like I said, it's a lot of weight to be coming back at you. But, my first guess is I'm sure there is a lot of personal use for sledgehammers, but the most common use I would have to guess is in construction and like construction companies and day-to-day work. So what does that look like if there's something, your company purchases sledgehammers, you're going to work one day, you start using it, and then it goes flying off the rails and you get injured? Is that a workman's comp? What is it? Is it still connected to the manufacturer? How does that all work?
Wow, that's like an excellent question. I'm like totally impressed. I mean, you're getting this shit.
That's my job.
I know, but you're doing it so well. Yeah, actually, so that's a great question. And if you are using a product and you get hurt on the job, you would be eligible, as long as you're in the course and scope of your employment, you're eligible to collect workers' compensation benefits. Now, workers' compensation benefits can be rather limited, and they don't include all of the areas of compensation that you would in a regular personal injury case. So there's also what's called like third-party liability. If the person or company that caused your injury is not your employer, and it's not a coworker, so it's a third party. So in this case, it would be like the manufacturer of one of these sledgehammers. Then you can actually bring a case against that company separately, and that would be outside of the workers' comp system. So you would actually go to a regular personal injury attorney.
So you can kind of double dip here, where you got the workman's comp and then also the individual case with the third party.
So it actually won't end up being a double dip, because what happens is if you do sue the third party, you then have to pay back workers' comp. Well, workers' comp shouldn't have had to pay for this because it's a third party that's at fault, right? It's a third party that caused the injury, not the employer. So, I mean, it's fair.
It's fair, but I mean, hey, I don't like to give money back. If I got a little bit in my pocket, shit, I want to keep that.
Well, and then again, you're going to be compensated for many more areas than you are through the workers' comp. I mean, you're going to get pain and suffering and more substantial damages than you would through the workers' comp system. So it still is going to be far better for you to go ahead and bring this third-party claim, even though you do have to reimburse workers' comp.
And it would, I'm assuming the third-party claim would probably take longer as well. So the workman's comp is something where, I mean, that happens and you need, medical attention, you have immediate time off, you have bills that you need to pay. The workman's comp is good for that kind of in the moment.
Yeah.
But when you really want to get the full scope of it, the third party, it seems like the move long term. And then even though you have to pay it back, you're still overall big picture getting more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so, but for the workers' comp, I mean, you're going to be getting paid for your lost wages as you're going along, as you're losing the wages, as opposed to waiting till the end of the case and getting paid back when you're suffering all that time without the income. And you're going to be getting your medical treatment probably through workers' comp doctors and through the system, but you're going to be getting that medical care without having to worry about out-of-pockets for that, and then pay it back at a later time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And, along with kind of the recall situation, I know you mentioned the air fryer. You want to make sure it's not in use anymore. And the air fryer, you get to cut a simple cord. Sledgehammer, I would imagine destroying that's going to be more difficult. Maybe not if the head just falls right off.
It's destroyed.
Is that something where
Don't super glue it back on.
You can go back to the store? Again, you have to go to the manufacturer, kind of tell them about it?
Either one. You could take it back to the store, and the store will then return it to the manufacturer, or you could send it directly to the manufacturer. Again, it's probably easier to do it just taking it back to the store. And just one more thing I wanted to throw in on the workers' comp, the third-party case, because there is a third-party case, the time frame for you to bring your lawsuit is usually much shorter. So for example, in Arizona, we normally would have 2 years. It's actually 1 year for the workers' comp. So, and the reason for that is that you can bring your claim up until the 1 year, and then after that 1 year, your claim now belongs to the workers' comp carrier that paid you for your injuries. So in theory, the workers' comp carrier could sue the manufacturer to get paid back directly for what they've paid out. And so sometimes you can do it after the 1 year, but you have to then ask the carrier for what we call a reassignment of the claim. You're asking for that claim back to you. And sometimes the carriers are happy to do that because they're going to gain in the end. They're going to get that money back that they paid without having to go and file the lawsuit themselves.
Do all the legwork.
Right. They're saying basically you went and you got a lawyer. Yeah. You want to go get the money for you and for them. and they just have to give you the right to go do that back.
Yeah.
So again, if you've passed, and that's Arizona law, and different states have different laws, but if you think you might have passed that first time frame, it still is worth consulting with somebody to find out if you could still pursue the case.
And I think this is a good leeway into something that you mentioned to me earlier, which was a question that you had received or that you had thought about payment towards lawyers. Why is it that they get the percentages that they get? And I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a good question as well. Is the percentages different depending on the type of case? Mass torts compared to PI injury, or they're both PI injury, but car crashes or workman's comp or disabilities. All of that. What do the percentages and lawyer fees look like across the board there?
Yeah, I mean that's actually a question that I've had so many times over the years. Is how much are you getting paid? Well, obviously you're telling them when you consult when you go through the consultation what your fees are. But why is it this much, and why should you get this much money? I'm the one who got hurt, that sort of thing, this goes back to really why we even have contingency fees. Historically, people had to pay lawyers by the hour, and that can be very difficult for somebody who doesn't have a lot of cash on hand to start paying hourly fees. So the contingency process, it basically allows somebody to go into an attorney and get the help that they need without any money out of pocket at all, and no risk. Because if the case is not successful, then they don't have to pay anything. So it really opened up the availability of legal services to a whole group of people that could never have accessed a lawyer in the past, just realistically. And then from the lawyer's perspective, I mean, there's there's some checks and balances in place as well, because an attorney knows, okay, here's this case. I'm going to represent this person. They have serious injuries, but how confident am I that this is a strong case that we will recover for this person? Because if we get zero, I'm going to put in all of this time and effort, and I will get paid zero. So this, a lot of people think, oh, there's all these frivolous lawsuits. Well, frivolous lawsuits are filed by stupid attorneys who won't be in business long because they're going to be bankrupt. But then there's also costs that are necessary to file a lawsuit. There's always a filing fee with the court. If you have to hire expert witnesses, I mean, even down to silly things like obtaining medical records.
But those are expensive.
They can be really expensive, and that's kind of become big business for some. I mean, there's companies that the doctors don't like. The doctors' offices don't want to go and copy all these records. That's a pain in their butt. They want to, cure disease and save lives, right? So they want to, farm this out, and then these companies just charge an arm and a leg for them. And again, those are costs that are coming out of the attorney's pocket. And if they're successful, then they're going to get reimbursed for those costs. Generally, most fee agreements do say that even if the case is not successful, you would still be on the responsible to reimburse the costs, although you don't have to pay them up front. Well, normally the fee agreements say this. However, in reality, I have never chased somebody down for costs. It's not going to be worth the time and the effort, and the likelihood of recovery is relatively low. So for that fee, I mean, the attorney is basically in it with you. I mean, we are, sharing in the upside and the downside. Yeah. And it actually makes it, it is in the attorney's best interests to get as much money for you as they possibly can, because, again, their fee is going to be a percentage of what the attorney recovers for the person. Yeah,
and I think there's several different angles you can kind of look at it there, where, like you mentioned, there are people that can't afford kind of that upfront payment, and that even if they have a fantastic case, even if there's everything there that it needs to be there, if you don't have that upfront money, then you just are kind of shit out of luck, which shouldn't be how it is. So adding those kind of fee agreements after the fact seems important for that. Not only that, but also, like you said, the interests align, right? Because, obviously everyone wants their money quickly. If a lawyer is getting paid by the hour, you could make the assumption that they want to take as long as possible, right?
Some of the other side, the defense attorneys on the other side, they're getting paid by the hour. I'm not saying anything about that except for what you're saying about that.
I mean, there is an argument there, and especially with PI injury, I've seen when I was working at Pincus, everyone wants their money so quickly, and they want reimbursement for damages, for injuries, whatever it is, which makes sense. But so do the lawyers, because that is the only time that they're going to get paid, or eventually when they get paid is going to be the same day, same time.
Well, I think the interests are aligned, of course, and we always want our clients to be happy, and clients who get their compensated faster are generally happier. But you also have to realize that the insurance companies can be very difficult and fight these things very hard, and there may be a liability issue. It may not be clear that there's going to be a success, and so there may not be an offer. And so oftentimes, and I've had this discussion many, many times with clients, is they're offering X number of dollars right now, and this is not fair compensation for your injuries. However, to get more, we're going to have to file the lawsuit. We're going to have to go to arbitration, go to trial, whatever next step that might be. And it's always going to be up to the client to decide, do I want to have, the guaranteed payout right this minute that's less? Do I want to take some risks and take more time and go forward? And that is the client's decision. Certainly there are occasions we've all heard of where attorneys are pressuring the client one way or the other for whatever their interests are, but ultimately the client gets to make that call.
Yeah. And something that I actually also thought of is, speaking of the medical bills and the cost of even requesting them. I remember single documents would be like $50 or $100, like some absurd amount. And I know that there's, if the case goes through, there is reimbursement there, but are you getting reimbursed off of your percentage, or is it being taken, like the cost of working the case being taken out of the client's percentage?
So it's generally, and again, some states do this a little bit differently, or allow different arrangements, but generally it is out of the client's portion, and that is because when the attorney takes on the case, their fee, so basically for their time and their energy as a percentage of what they're going to recover, and then it's the out-of-pocket. So for example, if a client wants to pay those costs as they go along, absolutely they can do that. I've never met a client who said, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. They would prefer that I go ahead and pay those costs. Now, and sometimes the costs can be really significant. Some of these mass tort cases, when they get remanded, just to get them to trial, you're looking at $250,000, $500,000 sometimes.
Jesus.
You have witnesses in other countries, you have travel expenses, all of these, maybe a little less in post-COVID and all of the Zoom stuff. But it's a lot of money. And there are sometimes firms that don't have that kind of money just in their coffers to put up. And so oftentimes firms will have either credit lines, like a cost credit line, that sort of thing. And then they're potentially even incurring interest on those costs. So, but again, that is the cost. It's the client's cost, and it does get paid back out of the end settlement.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I can kind of understand the confusion there as well, because there's so much work going on. And I remember I was originally confused about it as well, right? Because when a case comes in, you have an idea if it's going to be good. You don't know all the costs that are going to be associated, and you really are kind of taking on a massive risk with if it doesn't work out, if the case just ends up not being as good as you think it's going to be, or if just the fees are, even if it is a good case, the fees can just be very heavy until that time comes, until payday time comes.
Yeah.
It's just a debt you got to put on.
Yeah. You can and you can end up paying a lot of interest on those costs. Sometimes some firms do pass that interest on to the clients. One of the other things, as far as whether the costs come out of the attorneys or the clients, I did have a case where I was co-counsel with an out-of-state attorney, and in that state they did have the costs come out of the attorney's percentage. So they started with a higher percentage, but they paid the costs. And that was the first time I had seen that, and I saw a really big problem with that too, because what then happens is that now all of a sudden it's in the attorney's interest to have the lowest cost possible.
Yeah.
And this was a situation where we needed some really expensive expert witnesses. And if you're going to, you have an expert doctor who's going to talk about the injuries and the permanency and all of this, who charges $5,000, but holy crap, they're going to be the most amazing witness. And, or you can get one for, $2,000. you're kind of you're putting that all of a sudden the attorney's interest and the client's interest may not align. I mean, it should be something that gets discussed. And oftentimes I do have clients say to me, hey, how much are these costs going to be? And I will, over a certain dollar amount, I will discuss with the client.
Yeah.
So you could give the client that option. I really think that we should use this witness. This is how much it's going to cost. But you've got to make a good, strong case or you're all going to get nothing.
Yeah, and I think this kind of brings up a separate point, but something that I also thought was really interesting when I first learned about it is the value of expert witnesses and how different expert witnesses can be worth different amounts.
Yeah.
And also on top of that is how previous cases that they were expert witnesses can be brought into court.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you hear these horror stories of, witnesses that are essentially just kind of being snuck money under the table to say whatever. And they're just kind of, they'll say whatever for money. And then they get brought into a case and that can be brought up later if, their testimony was clearly just a little off or wrong at times.
Well, absolutely. And that goes to the bias. So a jury always gets to determine whether any witness is biased, and particularly an expert witness. And so in a lot of if you use the standard car accident and you might have an accident reconstructionist and you have one on each side. And then also IME, independent medical exam doctors who are not independent. We call them defense medical examiners. But where the other side, the defense has a doctor that they pay examine the patient to see if they're really injured or what their opinion is. And it's interesting too because these expert witnesses, it's big business. I mean, they're getting paid thousands of dollars an hour at trial for depositions, for prep time. And so, I mean, it's like their career. And so, you'll have these ones that are well known and, we can call them defense whores. I'm sorry, but, basically you pay and they'll bend over for you, right? They'll say whatever you want to say for the right amount of money.
Wow.
And that's why it's really important that either side gets to bring up past testimony because, one of the standard questions is how many times have you testified, Dr. X? 4,000. How many times have you testified for a plaintiff? 0. Or 3, or whatever it is. I mean, you see that they have a bias, and that they're and the jury needs to know that. Mm-hmm. Likewise, on the other side, I mean, the best witness that you can have is going to be a witness who's testified on both sides and who basically calls it as they see it, who is neutral and will say, sometimes they're on this side, sometimes they're on that side, but whatever the science, the medicine, the exam shows, that's what they say. Those are the witnesses that you love and that are really worth hiring.
And I never realized this was, like you said, a business. It is a literal business. People make their living, testifying and being an expert witness. And one of my first questions is, how is this even allowed? How is it that witnesses can get paid for testimony and to say certain things or to kind of fudge, maybe not the numbers, but just fudge their opinion a little bit? Because for me, as an outsider that doesn't have experience, I would immediately trust any expert witness that's coming in. If they're a certified doctor, they've been training for a certain amount of years, why would they lie for big business or
repeat customers? I mean, you have to have expert witnesses if it's an issue that the jury can't figure out for themselves. And so you see that in engineering where they can't calculate the force of the impact and the direction of the vehicles, and there's all these things about skid marks and yaw marks and all of this that the average juror doesn't understand. But to figure out how an accident happens, you need that. Likewise for medicine, what does this mean? What do we foresee for this person's future based upon this diagnosis? And the big one usually is this injury caused by this accident, or is it just coincident, or is it caused by something else? Yeah. So, and the reason that they get paid, because you have to compensate somebody for their time, and it depends on what they get paid normally. So if you have some world-renowned surgeon who's going to be making $10,000, that day or that morning, and you have them tied up in court, then they are allowed to say, I need to be compensated for my time. Now, they do pick the numbers, okay? And that's another thing that, we always ask them, well, Dr. Smith, how much are you being paid to be here today? Yeah. And I mean, the jurors, their eyes just bug out. They're like, what?
That's what I'm saying. As a normal person, you're like, I'm assuming this doctor's here for the greater good. He's just saying it as it is. But then you hear, oh, I'm getting paid $50K to show up this morning. I mean, that is insane.
Well, but they're like, well, but if I was in the hospital, I would
Yeah.
be getting paid X number of dollars for doing what I'm doing, and I had to take the time off, and I had to prepare, and I had to travel here, and that sort of thing. And then, but oftentimes both sides have the expert witnesses, and the expert witnesses have to. They're both getting paid, so some of that will even out.
Yeah.
And as soon as you ask that question, Dr. Smith, how much you're getting paid, and the jury's all like, holy shit. And then the other side gets up and and walks them through that. Well, doctor, how much do you earn?
And I mean, I'm sure the jurors are thinking too, like, shit, man, I'm doing this for free over here.
They're not. They get, depending on, they get paid like, I don't know what it is now, maybe $20 a day or something. I mean,
I can get a bag of chips from the vending machine.
you can barely pay parking, honestly. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But it's your civic duty.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know a lot of people try and get out of it for a variety of reasons. And then, the fact that they could be making more money doing something else is one of them.
And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but is there any off the top of your head, like interesting stories or interactions that you've had with expert witnesses? Because I can imagine with these mass tort cases where you have these pharmaceutical companies worth billions and, risking millions or billions, depending on which case, the money that they're willing to give that doctor to say what they want, I'm sure is pretty high up there. And the things that doctor is willing to say or do, I'm sure is also shocking at times.
Well, I mean, gosh, I could probably, I don't know about specific stories, but I can tell you that, while I was doing a lot of car accident cases, there was, a particular accident reconstructionist that was just there all the time. And he was just such a jerk. I mean, it was just totally a jerk. And I mean, when you're doing a lot of these cases and they're being hired by the defense every time, you see them a lot. And so, I mean, I used to just it wasn't a joke, it was reality, but I would kind of jokingly say it either in trial or in the deposition. Hey, how you doing? It's been, like a couple days since I've seen you? How's the family? I mean, it's like, I would kind of just joke around because, I mean, literally, I probably saw him more than I saw my spouse at that point. I mean, it was good God.
Yeah.
I mean, who are you, who are you shilling for today?
Yeah.
And at that point, I mean, I knew exactly what he was making annually. I mean, and plaintiffs' attorneys and probably defense attorneys as well share all of that information that we know about specific expert witnesses. I'm like, hey, so you testified for Joe Smith yesterday on a similar case, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, that's just, one of the hazards of the profession, unfortunately. And
is there situations where maybe an expert witness comes up and just says something they shouldn't have, or just clearly not perjures themselves, but says something that is just like unbelievable, right? That kind of just is a stain on their record, so they aren't using an expert witness as in the future because people are worried that that case or that specific interaction is going to be brought up. I
think that can happen. I mean, the one big kind of embarrassing thing that you can do, so when they're doing this as a business and they're testifying like every day, twice a day, that sort of thing, they don't even remember what the hell they said last month or God forbid last year. And so and it's a lot of legwork, but I mean, you can get depositions of all of their testimonies previously, and you just plod through and you read anything that's similar and try to catch them saying like the opposite thing. And I did have one on a cardiologist on a case that I had where it was great. I finally, this causes this. But wait a minute, 6 years ago, you testified in John Smith's case, and you said that this doesn't cause this. Yeah. And they'll try and hedge, and and the facts are never exactly the same, and blah 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 blah. Yeah. So they'll try and walk themselves out of it. But that's one of the hazards, I think, of being in that business for so long is that you don't even know what the hell you said, and you're not going back and reading your testimony and. Hopefully the attorney who is putting you on knows about some of these
things. It's like someone bringing up your high school text and be like, remember when you said this? And you just cringe to yourself like, oh, God damn it. So I wish that wasn't public record.
Yeah, I didn't have to worry about that in high school. But
fair. That's interesting, though. And it was something that just kind of came to my mind because that was something when I learned it, I had no idea just how much of a business expert witnesses were, that people did that for a living. And then also that you could bring up previous cases and kind of just throw it in their face if they're just kind of wishy-washy depending on who's paying them.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the skills that you develop as a trial attorney, and the legwork and the prep. I mean, know all of the background on this witness before you cross-examine them.
And I know that we still have a few more things to go through, so I want to make sure that we go over any updates on cases that we've discussed already that you may have or might have come up in the most recent week.
Well, just a quick update before we get into kind of the topic that we had on tap here, but we've talked so much about the autism and Tylenol, and it's a real hot topic. People have been asking me a lot of questions about that. And one of the things that just came up recently is that people are like, oh, well, I didn't use Tylenol, I use Excedrin, or I use paracetamol. Well, guess what? Paracetamol is Tylenol. I mean, it's important to, again, Tylenol is a brand name, which is acetaminophen. But, it's particularly in other countries. I know I was speaking with my friends in Australia, and they call it paracetamol there.
Oh.
Yeah. So the paracetamol, Excedrin, and just in some other products, for example, NyQuil, Dayquil.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, if you again look at what's included in there, it's oftentimes acetaminophen.
The good old lean.
Most Mucinex, Robitussin, Alka-Seltzer Plus. So it doesn't have to necessarily just be that little Tylenol capsule or caplet that you're taking. It may be an ingredient in one of these other products, and so people don't even realize that they had taken it.
Yeah, and so the case is, the way I call it is Tylenol and autism.
Right.
So even if you're not taking Tylenol, but you're taking some other type of brand or some other type of medication that has those
acetaminophen,
acetaminophen within it, then you can still count for the case. You can still get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's that is the product. Tylenol is a brand name, and it's the biggest brand name. So it's like, it's like tissue, it's a tissue paper.
Yeah.
Or Kleenex. I'm sorry. Tissue paper is Kleenex, but people call it a Kleenex, and that's actually the brand name. It's not the product.
That's interesting. I had no idea that it also went over to other types of products as well.
Yeah, it might be included in other products.
Yeah. So we've gone over a lot, and I want to make sure that we kind of cover one of the new cases that we're currently handling before we close out today. I don't know if you want to start and kind of introduce it.
Sure, and actually it's not a new case. It has been around for a while, but it's new for us to talk about. And I thought it was a good thing to talk about this time because last time we talked about the Brazilian butt lifts and cryotherapy, so we were all about the cosmetic surgery gone wrong. And I think we were even jokingly saying that, the boobs were safer than the butts and the guts. So, but there have been over the years issues with breast implants, the silicone issues years back, but they've been relatively safe in more recent years, particularly since they've been using saline. However, there is a particular type of implant that has turned out to be dangerous, and those are these allergen textured breast implants. And the issue with these is that they are causing a type of cancer. And the cancer is a relatively rare, they actually kind of figured it out from these cases. And what it's called is breast implant associated anaplastic large cell lymphoma. So for short, BIAALCL. But I mean, the first part is breast implant associated. I mean, this is very specific to people who have had breast implants. And again, it has to do with these textured implants as opposed to the smooth implants. So it's a particular type of the allergan implants. And they have been recalled. Actually, they were withdrawn from the market by Allergan, so voluntarily. When this started coming up and they realized how very dangerous these are, they did withdraw them. So that was in 2019. But as you may or may not know, when somebody gets breast implants, they plan on keeping them in for a long time. They usually say about 10 years, but in reality, it's usually more than 10 years. So there are a number of people who probably do have these implants currently and may or may not be aware of the risk that of the implants.
And the cancer that it causes, is this a strain of breast cancer?
Actually, that's a great question. You've had some good questions today. It's actually not breast cancer. It is a type of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that targets the immune system. And they think that the texturized part of these breast implants are having more of an immune response in your body, and that's what's triggering this particular type of cancer.
Okay, so your immune system, I'm sorry, I'm a little lost here on it. Your immune system is reacting to these textured substances of these breast implants, and then, I'm not familiar with lymphoma as well. And is the immune system, like I know with autoimmune disease, your immune system kind of attacks itself. Is that what's happening here as well within the immune system?
Well, yeah. So the implants are causing inflammation, and then the inflammation is causing the immune system to react.
And you said that these have already been recalled, so they are not recalled, but taken off the market. So they realized, that there was issues associated. What's the difference between recall and just being taken off the market?
Well, the company, so you could have a mandatory recall or a voluntary recall, but a lot of times I think what the companies want to do is to look like they're doing the right thing for one, and also kind of keep it more on the DL, right? Because they just say, okay, this, and they could say, well, these aren't selling well, or this or that. There's a variety of reasons why the companies will say, well, we're just voluntarily recalling them, but this clearly was as a result of these diagnoses and this new type of disease that we hadn't seen before, and that now it appears that it is associated with these particular types of implants. So they said, yes, we're taking them off the market. We're not selling them anymore. However, all of the women who have them, they've got this product in their body. And at this point, the FDA hasn't recommended, hasn't said go remove these things. Some patients are choosing to prophylactically remove them before they have symptoms. Quite frankly, if it was me, I would get these things out of me. I mean, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, terrifying.
But that's not. Everybody's going to make their own choice on that.
And that seems like pretty much the biggest difference between taking off the market is because they have taken off the market, so anyone now getting any breast implants doesn't have to worry about that specific kind or that specific brand.
Right. Yeah.
But the people that have it already, compared to a recalled situation where they would cover kind of the replacement and the surgery, additional surgery that would require to replace it. Now, if you want to get it taken out because it's not recalled, they won't cover it. It has to be on your own dime.
Well, actually, I'm not entirely sure about that, but and again, I don't know if Allergan is offering to pay for prophylactic removal. They may not. And in a lot of the circumstances, they say, well, not all of these are going to cause problems. Yeah. And so if you're having symptoms, I think it would be more likely that they would. Mm-hmm. But at that point, if you're having symptoms, you're probably going to pursue that on your own anyway, or you certainly could. So I don't really know if they're offering to do that prophylactically. We could actually research that and update. But again, they're saying not everybody gets this.
And it's unfortunate all of these cosmetic surgeries are causing, so many problems because like we said last time is that these people are coming in trying to whatever improvement they would like to see in themselves, they're pursuing that. And the last thing that they think is that they're going to, with the previous cases, have risk of death. But even with this, it's a serious cancer that really, really messes up, your immune system and everything in there.
Well, it is. It's very scary. And as we were saying, the risks that you're willing to take for a cosmetic procedure should be significantly different than the risks that you're willing to take for, for some life-saving or maybe major life-enhancing procedure, joint replacements, those sorts of things that really affect your mobility. And not everybody who has these implants just wants bigger boobs or perkier boobs or whatever. There, a lot of people do post-mastectomy, have reconstruction and implants, after a prior cancer diagnosis, that sort of situation.
I didn't even think about that. I couldn't imagine, you go through breast cancer or whatever it may be. You go through some type of procedure where, you have to pursue this for replacement, and then it leads to even more issues.
Well, you've survived breast cancer. Now you have a new breast, and now you have a lymphoma because you have that new breast. It sounds like a real nightmare.
So what are the steps that someone should take if they're concerned that they might be having symptoms? Even what are the symptoms? So something like cancer, I would imagine it could be a variety of things.
Well, actually, and again, it's not the breast cancer, so you're not so much, looking for lumps per se, but the symptoms tend to be swelling, and actually, it's not. There's a delay because you have this product in your body and it's starting to cause the inflammation. And so it's a long process to develop the disease. And the average time from implantation to diagnosis is about 8 years. So, you may have had these things for quite some time. And at that point, you're not thinking, after the surgery, maybe you had swelling, tenderness, all that kind of stuff. Well, 8 years later, what the heck? Yeah. So if you now start getting any kind of swelling, pain, excess fluid, you'll see usually one that the breast that's affected will look larger than the other one, redness, lumps, those sorts of things. If you see anything at all going on, definitely get in to see your doctor. If you don't know if you have these specific implants, you could certainly get in touch with your surgeon to find out so that you know what you're looking out for. But yeah, any of these symptoms, you definitely want to get in and get treatment as soon as possible. I think with any kind of cancer, the sooner you get treatment, the better the outcome pretty much is.
And it's interesting too, seeing these cosmetic cases where with the Brazilian butt lift, the biggest issue was the way that the doctors were going about it. It wasn't necessarily what they were, injecting into the butts. It was just the how deep they were going, or if they were touching like certain muscles and veins and whatnot, compared to this where it is literally the device that's being put into the body that's causing the problems.
Yeah, oh, exactly. This is definitely the device. And like with the cool sculpting, that was the actual device, although it's not something that was implanted. It was something that was used externally. But this is a device that's actually in your body. You can't get it out without help. And it's in there for presumably a good long time, 10 plus years. So these cases have been consolidated into a multi-district litigation that's based in New Jersey. But again, as we've said many times, the cases can come from any state in the country. They just get consolidated there. And if you think that you might have this type of implant, if you want more information, certainly feel free to contact us or another attorney who handles these types of cases. But again, sooner rather than later, particularly if you think you have symptoms, you want to get those treated. And if you do have this condition and you want to get compensated, it would be important to do that as soon as possible.
Yeah, in these cases too, which I find them even more terrifying, is when it's a delayed response, like the 8 years after, because I guess with the lumping and whatnot, the swelling, that is a telltale sign that there should be no reason for that late after the surgery. But I would imagine there's other symptoms as well that you're immediately not going to kind of make that connection to a procedure you had 8 years prior.
Well, and because lymphoma is not a breast cancer, so there are many, many people who don't have breast implants who get lymphoma, and some of the symptoms are similar. And so there are probably situations where people don't relate it to the breast implants. And that's actually, and it took a number of years, about 15 years, before they figured out, this particular condition and what this condition was, and that it was related to the breast implants, and then named it, breast implant associated.
And I was going to say, so this is a very specific strain of cancer that is lymphoma connected to the breast implant. So if you have this strain, then it is a tall tale sign that is connected.
Well, if it's called breast implant associated, it's associated with your breastplate. It would be really weird if you got it and you didn't have breast implants.
That's true. That's true. Well, it's because a lot of these cases, you get, you start having symptoms, you start having issues, but making that connection that it was actually that product or that device that caused it is a lot of the time, like a lot of the heavy legwork, a lot of the work that is required. But with this, it's like you're diagnosed and you immediately know that there's a correlation there.
Yeah, hopefully. Assuming your doctor knows what they're doing. But yes, there's enough in the literature out there now, and that should be the case.
Well, I think we are coming to close for the show today. I want to see if there's any topics you wanted to kind of sneak peek for next week's show.
Well, so next week we're going to talk about the CPAP litigation, and so that is the product that people use when they have sleep apnea. And so a lot of people, it can be a neurological condition. A lot of people who are overweight can have problems where they basically stop breathing while they're sleeping. So that's sleep apnea. And then, millions of people use this product called a CPAP machine that helps them breathe throughout the night. And there's been a massive recall on those. And it's been a pretty messy recall because they were not able to replace the machine. So people were kind of stuck using a machine that they knew that could again cause cancer, but actually they need them to sleep. So we're going to do some update on that and just talk about the litigation, something, again, that affects a lot of people.
Yeah, that I'm looking forward to that. As sad as that does sound, I am looking forward to a nice update there. But overall, I think this was a great show. We did have a little bit of technical difficulties, but we got through it. We had some good conversation. Quick reminder, if anyone does have any questions or concerns or just overall suggestions as well for the show, we would love to hear from you. Just throw in the comments, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, TikTok as well. But with that being said, I think we're ready to close out. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and hope you have a fantastic week.
All right, and see you next time from Australia.
Next time.
Bye.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.